The United States Defense Department has made available to us a missile capable of delivering a blast effect of 10 megatons, which is enough, in our opinion, to break through this last barrier between us and success.
And you asked us here to give you permission to fire it?
Yes.
When Crack in the World premiered in 1965, audiences weren't just watching another mid-century disaster film. They were staring straight into the anxieties of a world obsessed with science, progress, and the possibility of catastrophe. Far from Hollywood, and built on ingenuity rather than spectacle, the movie blended miniature effects, practical illusions, and bold ideas at a time when the future felt both exciting and unpredictable. From clever marketing tricks to accidents on set and scientific debates that shaped the script, Crack in the World hides far more secrets than its modest reputation suggests. These are 16 weird facts about Crack in the World. 1965, the movie that tried to tear the Earth apart.
Fuel pumps all clear.
Number 1. The fake scientific warnings that sold the film. Paramount didn't promote Crack in the World the usual way. Instead of traditional posters and trailers, the studio released newspaper ads designed to look like genuine geological alerts. These mock bulletins used stern headlines and technical language, warning readers that scientists feared the Earth could split open, exactly as shown in this motion picture. The campaign played directly into 1960s nuclear anxiety when the public was already primed to believe anything involving atomic power and the planet's crust. By disguising ads as warnings, Paramount made the film feel like a headline, pulled from real scientific debate rather than Hollywood fantasy. The trick worked. People noticed. Some even asked if the movie was based on actual predictions, which only helped fuel the film's strange reputation.
1-0.
Number 2. The real earthquakes that shook the production. While the cast and crew were filming in Spain, the country experienced a series of genuine tremors, small but noticeable quakes that rippled through parts of the region. For a movie about a fisher racing across the planet, it was an unnerving coincidence that didn't go unnoticed on set. Some crew members later recalled the timing as strange and too on the nose, adding an unexpected tension to the shoot. The quakes also fed into the film's atmosphere. Spain's rugged landscapes already made the locations feel unstable and raw, and the real tremors only heightened that impression. It gave the production an edge of realism no special effect could create, especially for a disaster movie built on geological fear. The coincidence stuck with people. Critics later mentioned it in retrospectives, calling it one of those rare moments when nature accidentally joins the crew.
Is there anything that we can do?
Pray.
Number 3. The eruption that borrowed footage from real volcanoes. For the film's explosive finale, the effects team didn't rely solely on miniatures or studio tricks. They licensed actual volcanic eruption footage from scientific archives, real lava fountains, ash plumes, and geological shock waves captured by researchers in the field. Blending this material with their practical setups gave the ending a raw, unpredictable energy that was rare for mid-60s sci-fi. The combination worked because the real footage had a texture the studio couldn't fake. The scale, the movement, the violent bursts of light, all of it added a sense of authenticity that punched far above the film's modest budget. Viewers might not have known they were looking at science reels, but they felt the difference. It became one of the film's most striking illusions, a seamless marriage of reality and craft.
Do you know what he wanted to tell me?
Yes, the crack is moving twice as fast as before.
Let's get back.
Number 4. The African setting that was actually Spain. Although the story takes place in Tanganyika, not a single frame was filmed in Africa. The entire production was shot in Spain, where rugged landscapes, old quarries, and wide open plains doubled convincingly for the movie's remote scientific outpost. The choice wasn't creative, it was practical. Spain offered generous production deals and access to skilled crews thanks to the wave of foreign films being shot there in the early 60s. The result gave the movie a distinct look. Spanish terrain had a harsher, more volcanic texture than typical desert locations, which ended up fitting the film's global disaster aesthetic better than expected. The rocky plateaus and dry earth created a believable backdrop for a story about the planet cracking apart. It also marked the film as an early example of US sci-fi using Spain as a stand-in, a trend that would grow significantly in the decade that followed.
They've got to be stopped. They're headed into the crack.
Number 5. the train scene that accidentally started a fire. During the shoot for a refugee evacuation sequence, the production used a real steam locomotive borrowed from a local railway line. As the train chugged through the Spanish countryside, sparks from its smokestack ignited the dry brush along the tracks. In seconds, a small flame turned into a spreading fire that threatened a nearby village cast, and crew dropped everything to help put it out. With the limited equipment on hand, they formed makeshift fire lines, smothered flames with blankets, and stomped out burning patches by hand. Local residents eventually joined in, and together they managed to stop the blaze before it reached any homes. The incident never appeared in promotional materials, but it became a story the crew remembered, a real-world disaster erupting right in the middle of filming a fictional one.
We can't get through on this road. We'll have to go around the other way.
Number 6. The Spanish epics that made this movie possible. Producer Philip Jordan had strong connections to Spain from his work on large-scale epics of the early 60s. Instead of building new networks, he tapped into the same crews, carpenters, and technicians who had worked on massive historical productions. This gave Crack in the World a level of craftsmanship rarely seen in small sci-fi films. The Spanish teams knew how to build impressive sets quickly, manage large props, and handle complicated effects work. Skills usually reserved for far bigger movies that shared DNA helped the film look more polished than its budget ever should have allowed. Number 7. The scientific advisor, who was just the producer's neighbor. Unlike big studio epics that hired university scientists, Crack in the World relied on a far more modest consultant, a local geologist who happened to live near one of the producers. He wasn't a well-known expert, but he understood enough about faults, magma pressure, and crust layers to help the writers sprinkle believable terminology into the script. His notes influenced everything from the laboratory dialogue to the way characters described the crack circling the planet. The production wasn't aiming for strict accuracy, just a thin layer of vocabulary that made the drama feel grounded for 1960s audiences. It became an inside joke on set. The movie's entire global catastrophe science was shaped by a friendly neighbor with a solid rock collection. We're only halfway through, and the strangest secrets of Crack in the World are still ahead. If you're enjoying these hidden stories, don't forget to use the hype feature. It helps push the video to more classic film fans who'd never find it otherwise. And of course, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next dive into forgotten cinema. All right, let's get back to the cracks, coincidences, and the weird turns this production took. The best surprises are still coming. Number 8. The science that sounded believable until it didn't. When Crack in the World was released, plate tectonics was still an emerging idea. The theory existed, but it hadn't yet become the universally accepted explanation for how the Earth's crust moved. Because of that, the film's premise, a fissure racing across the globe in a single continuous line, felt strangely plausible to mid-60s audiences. It wasn't accurate, but it wasn't laughable either. Writers leaned into that gray area. They used terms like mantle pressure, fault slippage, and planetary crust stress to sell the drama. And for the time, that was enough. Viewers didn't need perfect science. They just needed to believe the characters believed it. In hindsight, the film became an odd snapshot of a scientific moment in transition, a story built right on the edge between old geology and the new world tectonics would soon define.
I don't know if we can stop the destruction that's been unleashed, but we must face the fact that we have caused
A crack in the world.
Number 9. The critics who took it surprisingly seriously. For a modest disaster film, Crack in the World earned an unexpectedly respectful reception. Variety praised its special effects as startling, and the New York Times called it one of the year's strongest sci-fi thrillers. High praise for a movie built on miniatures and imagination rather than Hollywood spectacle. Reviewers seemed genuinely impressed by how convincingly it portrayed global catastrophe on a small budget. What helped was the film's tone. It played everything straight, no winking, no camp, no cheap thrills, which made the danger feel oddly credible for a 1965 audience. Even the love triangle and scientific jargon were treated with seriousness, giving the movie a weight that similar films of the era often lacked. Those early reviews helped cement its cult legacy. Decades later, writers still point back to that first wave of praise as proof that even B-movies could rise above expectations when crafted with care. Number 10. The miniature master behind the destruction. One of the film's secret weapons was Eugène Laurier, a veteran of miniature-heavy sci-fi and monster movies. His experience with detailed models, forced perspective, and optical tricks gave Crack in the World a scale it could never afford in real life. Many of the fissures, collapsing structures, and exploding landscapes were built by hand, then filmed with slow-motion rigs to make them feel massive. Laurier approached the project like a puzzle. He mixed painted backdrops, layered smoke, and practical debris to create the illusion of miles of terrain tearing apart. The effects team often worked on tiny sets no bigger than a kitchen table, yet on camera they looked like the surface of an unraveling planet. It's why so many shots still hold up today. The destruction wasn't digital, it was craftsmanship. Number 11. The sets that looked bigger than the budget allowed. Spanish film historians often highlight Crack in the World as a rare example of a B-movie that looked far more expensive than it really was. The production relied on clever set design, repurposed industrial spaces, painted backdrops, and layered lighting to make its underground labs and research stations feel enormous. With careful framing and shadow work, small rooms suddenly looked like sprawling scientific complexes buried beneath the earth. The trick was in how the elements were combined. Matte paintings extended hallways, reflective surfaces hinted at unseen machinery, and controlled smoke softened edges, so the sets felt deeper than they were. Nothing about the environments was physically large, but the cinematography made them look like part of a vast, high-tech operation. It gave the movie a polished look that surprised critics then, and still surprises viewers now. Number 12. The poster that promised a different movie. The theatrical poster for Crack in the World is legendary for how boldly it exaggerates the film's destruction. Towering skyscrapers split in half, cities crumble into glowing chasms, and giant fissures swallow crowds whole. Imagery far wilder than anything that appears on screen. It was classic 1960s marketing. Sell the spectacle first, worry about accuracy later. The artwork tapped directly into Cold War fear and the era's fascination with doomsday scenarios. By showing the Earth erupting on a catastrophic scale, the poster made the movie feel like an event, even if the budget never allowed for those city-toppling scenes. For many viewers, the poster was their first shock. The film's story only deepened it. Over time, that disconnect became part of the movie's charm. The poster didn't reflect the film, but it helped define its cult reputation. Number 13. The disaster without a monster. Unlike the creature features that dominated the 1950s, Crack in the World took a very different path. The villain wasn't a giant beast or alien invader. It was humanity's own scientific ambition. The movie framed its catastrophe as a direct result of pushing technology too far, an early example of what would later be called the eco-disaster genre. That shift gave the film a darker, more grounded edge compared to the pulpier stories of the decade before. Audiences weren't used to this kind of threat. There was no monster to chase, no alien to defeat, no easy way out, just the consequences of human experimentation spiraling out of control. For a mid-60s sci-fi film, that approach was surprisingly bold, almost prophetic. Decades later, critics pointed to this choice as one reason the movie aged well. It warned about our own mistakes long before environmental disaster films became the norm. Number 14. The real science project that echoed the film. Commentators often link the movie's premise to Project Mahole, a real American attempt in the late 1950s and early 60s to drill deeper into the Earth's crust than anyone had before. The project wasn't science fiction, it was an ambitious, heavily funded effort to reach the mantle and study the planet's interior firsthand. Its bold goals and equally bold failures made headlines around the same time Crack in the World was being developed. Though the film never mentions Mahole directly, the parallels were obvious to anyone following scientific news. Both involved extreme drilling, massive pressure zones, and debates about whether humanity should tamper with the planet's deepest layers. In some ways, the movie played like a dramatized version of the fears surrounding projects that pushed technology to its limits. The connection became clearer in hindsight, turning the film into a curious companion piece to one of geology's most notorious experiments. Number 15. The forgotten precursor to the 70s disaster boom. Years after its release, distributors like Kino Lorber began pointing out something critics had missed at the time. Crack in the World quietly did many of the things that the big-budget disaster films of the 1970s would later become famous for. Miniature-heavy destruction, scientists racing against time, global stakes, desperate solutions. All the ingredients that defined hits like Earthquake or The Towering Inferno were already here, just on a smaller scale. Because the movie wasn't a massive commercial event, its influence wasn't obvious at first. But over time, film historians began noticing how closely later blockbusters echoed its structure and tone. The film's commitment to realism, the seriousness of its performances, even the way it framed science as both savior and threat, all pointed toward what the genre would evolve into. It ended up earning a retroactive title, a disaster movie ahead of its decade. Number 16. The restoration that brought it back from obscurity. For decades, Crack in the World drifted into cult territory. Remembered by genre fans, but rarely seen in good quality. Old TV prints were muddy, colors were faded, and many viewers assumed the film would never look better than a worn VHS transfer. That changed when modern distributors released new restorations, finally giving the movie the visual clarity it hadn't had since 1965. The upgrades revealed details audiences had never fully appreciated: the intricate miniature work, the textured landscapes, even subtle lighting in the lab sets that had been lost for years. Critics on Blu-ray forums praised the transformation, calling the film a planet boiler with craftsmanship that deserved to be seen properly. The restored editions helped revive interest, first, turning a once-forgotten disaster film into a rediscovered piece of science fiction history. Crack in the World wasn't just another mid-century sci-fi thriller, it was a bold mix of imagination, fear, and ingenuity. Filmed far from Hollywood and shaped by real scientific debates of its time, it turned a modest budget into a story that felt global, urgent, and strangely believable. From marketing stunts and accidents on set to the craftsmanship behind its miniatures and effects, the movie's legacy lives in the details most viewers never saw on screen. It's a reminder that even the quieter entries in the genre can hold some of the wildest secrets. If you enjoyed uncovering these hidden stories, make sure to subscribe because the next journey into classic cinema's strangest corners might just be your new favorite discovery.